Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the 18th annual BC Natural Resources Forum. I'm Kevin Brown with KB Communications in Prince George, your MC this morning. Before we jump into the day's events, we'd like to acknowledge that the virtual conference, while broadcasting across the province, is produced within the area we know today as Vancouver and Prince George. The studios are located on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations and the Lheidli First Nation, respectively. We honor their language, culture, and history. We've got an exciting morning planned for you, starting off with the Honourable Seamus O'Regan, Canada's Minister of Natural Resources. Minister O'Regan is going to tell us about some of the federal initiatives and programs underway supporting natural resource development in Canada, which will help revitalize our national economy. Following the minister is our ever-popular forestry panel, moderated by Susan Yurkovich, President and CEO, Council of BC Forest Industries. The forest sector is a cornerstone of the BC economy and one of the largest employers in the province. You'll hear about a recently completed supply chain study that really hits home the integral economic contribution this vital industry makes in every corner of the province. We're going to cap off our morning with a keynote address from Chief Charlene Gale with the Fort Nelson First Nation. Chief Gale will enlighten us on some of the notable initiatives currently underway in the Fort Nelson community. In her role as chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, we'll also hear about the net zero energy projects being advanced by Indigenous nations across the country. So there's a lot to look forward to this morning. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the day, the Honourable Seamus O'Regan. Minister O'Regan was elected Member of Parliament for St. John South, Mount Pearl in 2015 and re-elected in 2019. He currently serves as the Minister of Natural Resources in the Government of Canada. Previously, he served as Minister of Indigenous Services and before that as Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Seamus O'Regan.
Hey everyone. I'm joining you from the other side of the country, 4.5 hours ahead of you, from the island of Newfoundland, the ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk peoples. I wish I was there with you. I mean, this is one of the premier events on the calendar for BC's natural resource industries. And I know you have a packed agenda. I won't speak for too long, but maybe I'll begin by sharing a story, because that's what we do here in Newfoundland. A while back, someone in my department told me some baseball trivia. It happened several summers ago on August 11th, 2015. Now, if I were there with you, I'd ask you to shout out your guesses. That's not an option, so I'll just say it. It's the only day in the long history of Major League Baseball that all 15 home teams won. That little piece of baseball trivia stuck with me because it's a metaphor for what I want us to do, which is for all of Canada's natural resource industries, all of our home teams, to take on the world and win. Whether it's our forestry sector, our mining and minerals industries, our energy producers, winning means producing the cleanest, most sought after LNG in the world, building on the Lower Mainland's reputation as the cradle of hydrogen fuel cell technologies, using our status as a Tier 1 nuclear nation to lead the way on small modular reactors, being first in the bioeconomy and critical minerals, first in energy efficiency, smart grids and storage technology, and in clean technology and green infrastructure. Now, I admit that's ambitious, but to stick with the baseball metaphor, we've got the big bats to do it, and our cleanup hitter is our natural advantage. It's our brand. There is no other democracy that has the bounty of natural resource wealth that we have. Canada's energy assets are the envy of the world. And that's important because this pandemic has accelerated a lot of the decisions investors were making before we'd ever heard of COVID-19. By putting their money into businesses, industries, and jurisdictions that are meaningfully combating climate change. And they're divesting from those that, in their view, are not. Because the question isn't whether we tackle the threat of climate change, it's how. How do we meet our needs, power our cities, power our towns, heat our homes, grow our economy while producing fewer emissions? Those questions are difficult, but some of the answers are in the minds of this audience. The technologies we have been waiting for and those that we haven't even thought of yet. To these big questions, I want to return to the sports metaphors, this time on the ice, and remind you guys what Gretzky famously said: we've got to skate to where the puck is going. The puck is going towards a clean energy future, to a low carbon economy. This is the opportunity of our post-COVID recovery, not just meet a climate emergency, but to strengthen our economic competitiveness, attract investments, create good, sustainable natural resource jobs. And Canada just unveiled an ambitious new chapter in our climate plan, the most robust climate strategy in our nation's history, aimed not at just meeting, but beating our 2030 Paris targets and becoming a net zero nation within 3 decades. Not just political promises here, actions. Last month, I announced the launch of Canada's first hydrogen strategy, a call to action to leverage our vast natural advantages and a plan to harness the momentum behind this cleaner fuel source. Look anywhere in the world where hydrogen is deployed. Canadian technology and expertise is at the heart of it. And British Columbia is leading the way in fuel cell technology right there in the Lower Mainland. Canada can be a world-leading supplier of low-carbon hydrogen, but we will need the experience and the ingenuity of BC's innovators to do it. It's also true that in the midst of developing the technologies that will power our future, oil and gas will continue to be a part of our energy mix and our economy for some time yet. If we keep improving the quality, we improve the quality by lowering emissions. And when we lower emissions, that's when we drive competitiveness. And that's exactly what the industry is doing, because Canada's petroleum sector is by far our country's largest investor in the clean tech sector. More than 70% of all private sector investment in Canadian clean tech over the past decade, more than $1 billion every year. BMO Capital Markets tells us that Canada's oil and gas sector is already leading the world in environmental, social, and governance ESG performance, a finding that has since been supported by studies at Yale and at the World Bank. None of that would have been possible without the hard work that we have done when it comes to reconciliation, diversity, inclusion, and reaching our environmental targets. That matters in BC as you keep developing Canada's LNG industry, planting our flag on the world stage of natural gas exporters, positioning us to supply LNG to dynamic emerging economies, replacing more carbon-intensive fuels, and helping us to combat our changing climate. We're also making generational investments to build on our position as the 3rd largest producer of hydroelectricity and as a global leader in solar and wind and geothermal and tidal, backed by close to $1 billion to develop these sources of renewable energy and modernize our grids, along with $300 million to help rural, remote, and indigenous communities reduce their reliance on diesel fuel. And to tie all of our energy sectors together, we are working with British Columbia to use clean electricity to power the province's natural gas industry, as part of the same vision behind the $2.5 billion that we have earmarked for bringing clean power to more Canadians. It's an all energy options in approach. Now, as I said at the outset, I want to see all of our natural resource industries competing on the world stage and winning. In British Columbia, the home team also includes such star players as the mining and forestry sectors, not only as key pieces as your province's proud history, but as essential parts of Canada's future. So that's why we're working with our allies, with the United States and other international partners to secure global supply chains for critical minerals and the raw materials that will drive our clean energy future in everything from solar panels to wind turbines, SMRs to fuel cell technologies, robotics to electronics. We've also just tweaked our mechanisms for flow-through shares to support mineral exploration and ensure that BC has the mines of tomorrow to drive our clean growth. And we continue to work with BC and with all of our provinces and territories to implement the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan, to reclaim our place as the world's leading mining nation by bolstering our competitiveness, promoting innovation, and advancing environmental stewardship, as well as supporting greater Indigenous participation and taking a larger leadership role on the international stage. The forestry sector is no different, a sector that has the promise and opportunity of the bioeconomy. And I'm not just talking about developing the low carbon fuels that will power 60% of our economy in 2050, but also building higher with wood, finding more new export markets, supporting more Indigenous opportunities in the sector, and pursuing every option for fair and free trade in softwood lumber with our friends south of the border. We're seeing results on those fronts. Last month, the United States lowered most of its tariffs on our softwood lumber exports. With President Biden inaugurated last week, we will keep advocating a fair deal is not only possible, it's in the best interests of both countries. That matters for Canada, it matters for BC. And if I can leave you with just one message today, let me go back to where I began with these remarks. Embracing climate action within our natural resource industries is the single greatest way to protect our industry's economic competitiveness in the long term. Or to go back to my baseball analogy, the only way to hit home runs is to swing for the fences. So let's do that. Let's double down on our common mission of net zero emissions by 2050, a national economy that continues to grow, and a clean energy future that leaves no one behind. That's our goal. The world is watching us, and Canada will lead. I believe that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister O'Regan. We sincerely appreciate your taking time to speak today. That concludes our first keynote address of the morning. Please return to the agenda and select the next session to view the live stream forestry panel, Deep Roots, Strong Communities. Don't forget to have your questions ready to input into the Whova Q&A for our panelists today.